Maybe you're listening and you're like, Annie, this is not for me. I am one of the good ones. I am one of the people who calls out racist behavior when I see it. I've been reading and listen to your podcast for heaven's sake. So this is not work that I need to dive into a little bit deeper, but hear me out when I say this.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Welcome to Represented, the podcast. I'm Aniki Shuru, racial equity coach for online business owners who want to be intentionally inclusive by building a business that is racially equitable. I created this podcast to normalize a conversation around racial inclusion so that fear is no longer the barrier that gets in the way of doing this work. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Whether you're taking your first steps or you're well-versed in the journey towards racial equity, this space is for you. So welcome home, friend. Let's get started.
From coast to coast, around the globe, we are represented.
If you've been listening to this podcast for some time and you found yourself asking, what can I do from here? I'd love to invite you to join the next round of my signature 10-week program, Represented. This is where I get to support online business owners on their racial awareness journey so they can build a business that is intentionally inclusive. If you've ever wanted to do anti-racism work in a space that allows you to come as you are without guilt, shame, or judgment, then this, my friend, is the program for you. Enrollments are currently taking place with scholarships available, and we commence on Thursday, 10th October. Head over to anikishuru.com/represented for all the details. Link is in the show notes. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Represented Podcast. This is a solo episode, and I have so missed doing this. It's been a little while, and when I did the live training last week on Microaggressions 101, it not only dawned on me how much a vast majority of people do not know about microaggressions, but I felt it was necessary for you as a faithful listener to this podcast, for you to have an understanding of what microaggressions are. Now, of course, in the live training, which a replay is now available for you to purchase if you'd like to go ahead and do that, and the link will be in the show notes, I go way, way deeper. But today, I just want to focus on giving you a little bit of an introduction of what microaggressions are. Also share with you what thought leaders in this space think of the term microaggressions, and leave you with something to just think about, particularly when I share with you the examples of microaggressions and some of the ones that perhaps are quite controversial, where not everybody agrees with that. And so before we can even begin, I want to set the foundation for this conversation. Microaggressions are not just race-based. There are different types of microaggressions, and they range from race itself, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, religion, and other features that reflect some aspects of personal identity. And while microaggressions most often present as verbal slights in spoken language, they may also take on non-verbal or environmental forms. So our focus today is obviously on race. And this is something that once I describe what it is, a lot of people, particularly those who are white, go like, I didn't realize that is what a microaggression is, and that this is how it leaves somebody feeling. And so microaggressions are subtle, negative, racial messages that leave the receiver feeling humiliated or disrespected. The reason why they are called micro is because they happen from person to person rather than on a large scale where they'd be macro. They can happen intentionally or unintentionally, consciously or subconsciously. Now, the term microaggressions was first introduced by a professor from Harvard University called Chester M. Pierce in the late 70s, 1978, if I'm not wrong. And I'll pop a link in the show notes with further information to reference this information that I'm giving you. But I'd love for us to dive into some of the examples of microaggressions and the impact they have on people of color. So the first one, which is probably the most controversial one, is where are you from? Really? So when you ask somebody who is from a different racial background than you are, hey, Annie, where are you from? And I say, hey, I'm from Australia, or I'm from Sydney. And you go ahead and say, no, no, no. Really, where are you from? Or originally, where are you from? See, you're trying to place my identity because I don't look like the majority of people in this part of the world. You want to place my roots. You want to know where I originated from. And the thing is, on the surface, that might not feel as though it is anything that is negative to do or to ask. But here's the thing. When you keep asking somebody that question, over and over again, and not the same person, obviously, but different people who look different from you and sound different from you, you have no idea how many times they've been asked that question. For me, majority of the time, when people want to break ice with me, particularly in networking spaces, at events, that is normally one of the first questions. Hey, where are you from? And when I say where I'm from, there's a vast majority of them will often want to know the roots of where I'm from. And then the conversation steers towards my roots or it changes. And the idea here is that the person is left feeling like they don't belong. So even though you might say, for example, in my case, Sydney, and somebody says, no, 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 originally, it's like saying, no, you're not from here. You know, I want to go back to your roots. You know, it's almost like having to prove your identity, having to say, here's my family tree, this is how it all went down. Whereas with other people who are white and they're together, that may not be the case of asking where you're from. And so just be aware of what asking that question means. And there are people of color who say, hey, I have no problem being asked that. I am so proud of where I come from. I am just waiting for somebody to ask me where I'm from so I can tell them. Again, realize that there is nuance. I'm not speaking to everybody's experience, but I'm speaking to the fact that this is a microaggression and you should be aware of it because it's subtle negative racial messages that leave the receiver feeling humiliated or disrespected. Now, when you know that is what a microaggression is, and you know it has the potential to do that, then I guess my question to you is, why would you then go ahead and do that? And the question I often get asked in reverse is, so what do I say, Annie, when I meet somebody who's different from me? What do I say? What can I ask them instead of asking them where they are from? Well, just think of them as any other person and how's your day going? What are you up to? How's the event going? It doesn't always have to be centered on their identity. And I give this example of, for example, if my mom was going to visit me and she's over here and somebody asks her where she's from, she would be happy. She would absolutely be delighted to say she's from Kenya and she's here to visit her daughter and her grandkids and all that kind of excitement. See, the thing is, she doesn't get asked that all of the time or most of the time because she resides in Kenya. But for me, that has been my experience for the past over 20 years. And there is that fatigue, there is that cumulative effect of being reminded that you don't belong. And so I hope sharing that example of mom and me, who have two different lived experiences, respond to such a question. And so next time you're so quick to, ask the question, where are you from? Really, or even just asking the question, where are you from in the first place? Take the time to reflect and think, what else could I ask that could allow us to have a really good conversation? And you never know, through the conversation progressing, the person might say, hey, I came here as an international student, originally from Kenya, and these are the things I love about being in this country, or these are the things that make me feel like I miss home because I don't have access to this and that and the other. And so don't be quick to rush and ask, where are you from, really? The other one is, wow, your English is so good for a Black person. So already you have a preconceived notion that somebody who looks a certain way couldn't possibly speak such good English. And so again, here you're making an assumption. And a lot of microaggressions stem from people making assumptions. Again, going back to how this is received, it makes the receiver feel humiliated or disrespected. Another one is, your skin tone is not dark enough. Are you sure you're from Africa? Or, you're too light-skinned. Are you sure you're indigenous? You don't look indigenous. And so again, that interrogation of wanting to know, are you really telling me the truth? I need you to almost justify your identity, your existence. That's how it's coming across. To you, you might think, hey, I'm just having a little bit of a conversation. What's the big deal? There is a big deal, because intent doesn't equal the impact. What you're intending to do, and this might be break the ice or get to know the person a little bit better, that's not how it's landing. It's actually landing in a way that is making them feel othered. It is making them feel that they don't belong. And it's reinforcing those racial stereotypes. And I could go on and on and on with more examples, but another one, a last one that I will share, and obviously I get into much, much detail in my live training 101, Microaggressions 101 live training, and you can catch the replay. I don't see color. Now, I have to admit, when this statement used to be said by friends of mine who are white, I never took it negatively, because to me, they were trying to make me feel like I was part of them, that I belong, that my race or how I look like is not a factor here, that we're just humans. But with time, and with having lots of conversations with people who identify as Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and of course, educators, other educators in this space, when you don't see color, you're actually not, or rather, or saying that, it's not that you don't see, you do see. It is choosing not to acknowledge the differences, choosing not to acknowledge the fact that there are setbacks, there are challenges, there are barriers that exist between us, and you're navigating that. So to assume that, we are just the same is not a truth, because that's trying to make everybody like our needs are the same, and our needs are not the same. And this is where equity comes into play. And it's one of the definitions that I spend a lot of time unpacking with my students inside my program Represented is, what is equity? Equity is not the same as equality. Equality is different. Equality is ensuring everybody is treated the same. No one is treated less favorably than the other. We're treating everybody the same. But equity really is about leveling the playing field so that those who need the most support get that support. It is based on individual circumstances, right? And so Is the term microaggressions outdated? So there are other terminologies. There are people in this space, educators, thought leaders, who feel microaggressions, why are we using that term that Chester M. Pierce came up with in 1978? Why aren't we using other words that truly depict what it means? And one such person is Ibram X. Kendi. He writes in his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and I quote, "I do not use microaggression anymore. I detest the post-racial platform that supports its sudden popularity. I detest its component part, micro, and aggression, a persistent daily low harm of racist abuse is not minor." I use the term abuse because aggression is not as exerting a term. And that is powerful. How Kendi writes that, and for him, it's abuse. And the word microaggression minimizes the reality of what is being described, what is happening. It's not big enough of a statement, is what he's trying to say, to call these subtle negative racial messages micro, and not is not inclusive enough to call it an aggression. So micro is too small. Saying aggression is not inclusive enough when it's actually abuse, according to him. And so very, very powerful statement there. And Tiffany Yana, who is the co-author of the book Subtle Acts of Exclusion, How to Understand, Identify, and Stop Microaggressions. She says this. She prefers to call them subtle acts of exclusion. And I feel like I'm steering in that direction, or I am in that direction, where the behavior might be subtle and not intentional, but it serves to exclude people and pushes them further to the margins. And so, particularly as a coach who is holding space for others, it is so important that you understand the power of your language, the statements that you might be making. And these statements come from the implicit biases that you hold. We all have implicit biases. Some that we are not aware of, they're unconscious, and they happen on autopilot. When certain things happen because of how we've been conditioned, we respond in a certain way, and that response could be stereotypical. That response could be a prejudice. That response could be racist. And so, whilst understanding microaggressions is really, really important, and how to avoid them so that you're not causing these racial slights over and over and over, is to really dive deeper into this work of anti-racism. And I want to share with you about my program Represented, because right now the doors are open. And this is a 10-week program where I share step-by-step process of how to understand anti-racism. First and foremost, a lot of people, and maybe you're listening and you're like, Annie, this is not for me. I am one of the good ones. I am one of the people who calls out racist behavior when I see it. I've been reading and listen to your podcast, for heaven's sake. So this is not work that I need to dive into a little bit deeper, but hear me out when I say this. A lot of times, just like implicit biases, we don't know what we don't know. And it is when we begin to educate ourselves that we begin to realize, hang on, I might have been perpetuating a exclusionary system, an oppressive system that I didn't even know. And now that I have my eyes open, how can I do better? And so that is where Represented comes in. It supports you to understand matters to do with race at a deeper level. And I want to take a moment to just share with you a little bit more about the program, the modules inside the program. There are 4 modules. One of the modules is the first module is diversity, equity, and inclusion, going beyond skin deep. This is where I share the origin of racism and how systemic racism operates. The cost of racism to white people, because a lot of times people think that the cost is only to the victims, those who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. But no, there is a cost to white people, and you get to understand that. The role the dominant culture plays in business when it comes to how you're operating in your business or how you're setting up your business or even how you're showing up, how that dominant culture, which is whiteness, how that plays a role in your business. Secondly, in module number 2, we get to do a personal and a business audit. And this is where we get really, really practical in terms of the exact work you need to do in your business, taking away the guesswork so that you're being intentionally inclusive. We look at the implicit biases that are lurking in your life, and we do this. We do a deeper dive than what I've been, sharing here today. We do a much deeper dive, and the role racism is playing in your business. It is, and you probably don't realize it, but once I begin to unpack this for you, you will begin to see it in a different light. And that's where doing that personal and business audit is so key. And then in module 3, we talk about conscious inclusion, because it's one thing to say, I am a good person, I am a kind person, I have friends who come from different racial backgrounds, and so I am so inclusive. But inclusion is not just because you're a good person. Inclusion is actually very intentional. You have to be intentional about it. It's a conscious decision that you've made. And especially if you're somebody who identifies as white, you will always default to your whiteness because that is what you've always known. And so module 3 helps us unpack that and gives you a step-by-step guide on how to be consciously inclusive, beginning with language. How do you use inclusive language? What is inclusive language? The strategy to put in place when hiring or collaborating with people of color. How do you begin to have a relationship with them that is genuine? And what makes a scholarship program successful? And how can you create one that is safer and supportive for recipients? A lot of times I see scholarship programs being put in place as a way to either tick the box or to feel like we're doing something genuinely, wanting to do something, but in the process, not thinking, how will this be received by the recipients? First and foremost, have I cultivated a space that is inclusive? How will they feel when they come in? Have I, as a person who is offering this scholarship, have I done work in this space to allow them to feel that sense of safety? Because if you haven't, then perhaps you need to press pause, my friend, begin to dive into this work. And then when you have the knowledge, begin to make that offering. Now, look, I'm going into module 3 and talking about scholarships. All right, let's move on. Module number 4, allyship and advocacy. And I love this module because this is where we get to roll up our sleeves and get to work. I talk about what it really means to be a genuine ally and advocate. A lot of people ask the question, Annie, am I being performative? If I do this, if I share this, is this going to be seen as being performative? I address all of that. The steps to take to become an active ally and advocate, because once you begin to do this work, it's not something that you keep to yourself. You don't just go like, oh my goodness, this is so shocking. I can't believe this is still happening. And you get outraged, and that's all you do. You're just outraged, but you don't take any action. I show you how to become that active ally. And then we talk about calling out versus calling in. And this is where all the juice is, because you get to realize that there's a way you can do this work that can be done with love, with compassion, with grace. It doesn't always have to be calling out people. It can be done differently and actually yield more long-lasting results and have a long-lasting impact. And then I also share about how to keep going, especially when it gets difficult. Now, the process inside of Represented is number one, you will get lifetime access, including anything that gets updated, you get access to that. At completion, you get a certificate of completion, including a badge. And this badge, listen up, is really, really key in that it signifies that you are racially aware and informed. And I cannot tell you how the security, or rather the ability for somebody to take a step closer to you when they see that this is work that you have done, and that you're able to display this and say, I am racially aware and informed. I am doing this work. I have studied. I am doing what I can to be a safer space holder. And then inside the program, we have 90-minute fortnightly group coaching calls. We have them at different times. There's one at 10 a.m. and at 7 p.m. You do not need to attend both. Simply, there are two different time zones to cater to the different locations that people might be tuning in from. And the calls are always recorded. Modules are also recorded and released fortnightly, so they're drip fed. So you can study at your own pace, and it removes the overwhelm. For me personally, I'm one of those people who, if I go into a library of resources and I'm seeing all of these things, I get overwhelmed. Firstly, I'm excited, like a kid in a candy store, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I get all of these things. And then guess what happens? Because of the excitement, I get overwhelmed. There's just too much to choose from, and I don't even know where to start. And so I find that when I am only given access to a few things, one or two, three things, I am able to pick one, move, and make progress, as opposed to having everything. And so that's one thing that I really, really love, that the information is drip fed to you on a fortnightly basis. There are workbooks for each module to record your reflections and insights. And what I'm really, really proud of is the wide range of curated library of resources to complement each module for further development for yourself. And most importantly, there's a community of supportive business owners to journey alongside with you. Now, when you check out the link, anigishuru.com/represented, and you go into that link, you will see the current course calendar. We begin for this particular round on Thursday, the 10th of October, but you'll be able to see when the welcome call is Module 1, Module 2, Module 3, Module 4, and then the closing ceremony. Now, your investment. This course is 1,500 Australian dollars, and there are payment plans as well. There's a 6-monthly payment of 250 and an extended monthly payment of 12 monthly payments of 125 Australian dollars. Now, what is unique about this payment plan system is that you don't get charged more just because you've chosen to take the payment plan method. I find that those who are choosing to take the monthly payment option are the ones who probably need the most support. And so adding an extra amount there of interest just makes it that much more harder for them. It's just adding up more expenses for them. And so trying to be as equitable as possible with the pricing and the investment for this program. And then, depending on when you listen to this episode, there's some fast action bonuses. And number one is a 60-minute DEI masterclass where I come into your program, whether it's a group program or an event that you're having, an online summit, or for your team, you're bringing your team together. And I do a tailored DEI masterclass for 60 minutes with the ability to ask questions. That is valued at 1,500 Australian dollars, and it's an absolute steal. And secondly, you get one of my most popular workshops. It's an inclusion statement workshop that walks you step by step. This is a 3-hour workshop that walks you step by step how to create an authentic DEI statement that is true to you and your business. And again, that is all for free when you join Represented by a certain time. So depending on when you listen to this, this fast action bonuses may still be available or may not be. Now, you've heard me speak about this for quite some time, but I think it's so important for you to hear feedback from others who have taken this program. So it's not just me talking about it, but others just like you, other business owners, other online business owners, coaches who have been impacted by this program Represented.
I was a yes when I signed up to the wait list, right? Like I was like, well, I know I'm doing the next round. When does it start? I'll just join the wait list and I'll be, I'll be on, because I knew that I wanted to invest in this, and I knew that I wanted to invest in this with you and learn from you. And it has been such an incredible experience to learn, but also be in your space. Biggest thing that you have taught me here and continue to teach me, and speaking to having past DI experience, the main reason I wanted to come into this space is because I wanted to learn from you, because the way that you teach this work is very different and it's far more aligned with me and my values. What I loved about this course was just all of it being so practical and grounded as well. I think it's really easy, like we spoke about, to just kind of reshare things on social media and oh, let's jump on these trends and all of that, but actually to peel back and have these conversations.
Being able to articulate my frustrations, my needs, my pain has been super empowering. From the very first session, I felt that I was heard, I felt supported, I felt valued, no longer marginalised and gaslighted for calling things out as I saw them.
The way you hold space and the way you teach and the way you call in, but also the way you so masterfully, gently help us see our blind spots. I see you as a coach. I just see the way you do that, and it's beautiful, it's powerful, it's changed me profoundly.
I was incredibly overwhelmed in the first few weeks of how little I knew, and you really made it possible for me to not be embarrassed or guilty or beat myself up.
Okay, I'm a woman of colour. Why would I want to do this work? I'll be very honest. But something just made me want to do it. I don't know, it was that feeling of sisterhood with you.
Yeah.
But also I've learned just to follow those intuitive hits, and it has just opened up just such an incredible, rich and beautiful world.
I expected it to be scary and deep, but I didn't expect it to be as deep as it was, because of how loving it felt and how safe it felt. And I think the biggest difference that it's made for me personally is, and it's such a subtle thing, but it's huge. It's, instead of asking the question, how can I solve this problem, or how can I do this right, I'm coming from a perspective of what would it feel like to be a person of colour in this moment, to have this experience, or to go into a space with me, or to look at my website, or to be in this conversation. What would it feel like? And that has a very different impact on the way that I'm responding to the situation.
I'm so moved by who you are that you would choose a life that's uncomfortable in order to make a difference. You could go home to Kenya and not have to experience any of the things that you experience here, and you choose not that. That's leadership, that's brave, that's commitment that's so inspiring to me. And, I'm just so grateful for you.
Wow, those words get me every single time. I am just so incredibly humbled when I hear the impact this work is having on other online business owners who are trying to understand this work of anti-racism, do better, and be as inclusive as they possibly can. And so if everything that I've shared today on this episode around microaggressions and the program Represented, and you want to dive deeper, you want to be in community with me, and an example of like some of the women who just shared their experiences inside Represented, I would love you to join me for the next round. All the details are via the show notes, and that website is anigishuru.com/represented. I hope you can join us.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave a review so this podcast can reach more online business owners, and together we can begin to normalize racial inclusion in the online coaching space. I'd love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where this podcast episode was recorded, the Wiradjuri people in central New South Wales, Australia. Music produced in Nairobi, Kenya by Patrick St. P. Mbaru and Kambua Mathu. Vocals by Joanne Matata.
Represented.